I'm Mr. Q, and I'm going to model in this video how to compare and contrast two different political systems. So I'm going to model communism and democracy, and then you on your own are going to look at communism and fascism. So just a little bit of background information. During and after World War I, Europe was going through an immense change, political change, geographical change. We know from the end of World War I that Germany was facing extreme economic depression. The countries that had been in Europe fighting the war had been destroyed. So before World War II, European countries are in an economic depression, just like the United States is in the Great Depression. In that struggle, we see the Russian government forming a communist government, and Germany and Italy form fascist governments. To put that in context, the United States, Great Britain, and France are all different types of democratic governments. So we're going to compare and contrast these three different forms of political systems to get a better understanding of the differences and what maybe led to the World War II conflict. So you're going to have a source that looks very similar to this, although at the top yours is going to say communism versus fascism, and it's long, but you should read it closely because these are complex topics and they're important to understand for both history, an understanding of what was going on in history, but also today. Um, so I just zoomed into the beginning here, and I'll read the opening. I underlined it. If you're able to print out these readings, or if you're able to get them hard copy from your teacher, that's fantastic because you can read them a little bit more closely. If not, try to take your time. You can take notes as you read so that you know the differences and similarities. So this starts off. Democratic and communist political systems are based on different ideological principles. Although superficially they seem to share the power to the people philosophy, in practice, the two systems of government structure the economic and political fabric of society in markedly different ways. So the first thing that jumped out at me is they actually kind of gave me a similarity. Even though they say that they're very different, this is a similarity. Both political systems do try to share the power of the people. I'm not going to close read the entire thing because that would take a really long time, but I'm just going to pull out the most important pieces that I'm seeing. So in the next paragraph, I see communism is all about government control of capital and industry, whereas democracy is all about the individual rights to own the means of production. And you'll see I wrote C and D just to note that that's about communism, that's about democracy. If you have paper copy and you can annotate, I strongly suggest simple annotations to just note S for similarity, C for communism, D for democracy, or F for fascism. Continuing on, I underlined here that in a democratic society, people are free to create their own political parties and contest in elections, whereas in a communist society, government's controlled by one party and dissent's not allowed. So the reading is going to go on, but it would take me a long time to go through everything. So I did underline everything that I found to be very important. So as you're looking at the screen here, you'll see what I pulled out as the most important pieces of this reading. You should do the same thing. This is a long reading, so it's up to you to pull out the most important bits so that you get a concise but cohesive Venn diagram. So the first thing to note in our Venn diagram is what countries maybe represent these different political systems. And there are, of course, more than one. But for communism, we want to remember, especially at the context of the beginning of World War II, that Russia it has formed a communist government. And we are a democracy. So I just put the US over on the right. So looking at communism and thinking about the article I just read, I'm going to write down the most important parts. So these are things that are going to come up a lot. Government control as a major point in communism. And not only government control, but there's a single political party. So there's no competition or debate between the people. That means that there's also no dissent, no freedom of the press, no protesting. There's also no religion. No private property is a major part of communism. And human needs direct production. And that means that instead of people trying to make a lot of money and then producing the stuff that's going to make them a lot of money, instead they're going to make products because humans need it. In an ideal communist society, everyone is equal, but it is important to note that true communism has never been achieved. So that's what I pulled from the reading as the most important parts of communism. And for democracy, we'll see individual choice, which is very different from communism, and fair democratic elections and dissent allowed, meaning there's multiple political parties, and you can protest, you can campaign. We really value, especially in the United States, freedom of speech. We also have freedom of religion. In an ideal democratic society, there's a free market in democracy. Democracy and capitalism often go hand in hand. Money leads production, so people want to make money, so they're going to produce what the items that will make them the most money. Democracy does try to limit the different classes and discrimination between classes, but they do form in most democracies, and this is an important thing to recognize. Democracies generally have a majority rule, and the majority can discriminate against the minority. But there are also similarities between the two systems. So first of all, they're both political systems, and they do both try to give the power back to the people. They're not monarchies, but in very different ways. There are many forms of both parties. So the United States is just one democracy, but there are many across the world, both today and right before World War II. And communism has expanded out of Russia. And they both struggled to reach their ideal. There are problems with both political systems, and so it's important to recognize that. Okay, so you're now going to create a Venn diagram or compare and contrast communism with fascism. You're going to use a very similar article, which is provided by your teacher, and make sure to look at the most important details of these two political systems.